Welcome back to Wolf Guitars and Gear. Today we're going to be talking about boost pedals and why you might need one. But before we get going, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so that you get all future episodes. We've got a lot of great content coming that you're not going to want to miss. So the first thing I want to talk about with boost pedals is my introduction to them and my first experience with them. So back around the year 2005-2006, I was in a band called For Those Who Kill. We were kind of doing like a post-hardcore thing, kind of, very similar in a lot of ways to maybe like Under Oath or something along that, but also with a lot lighter stuff. So we also had like some really indie rock type things going on with it as well. It was a really fun band, and at that time I had a house, and a lot of the members of the band, minus the drummer and the singer, were living with me. And so we just had tons of gear around the house, and our bass player Hunter actually had this old Xotic head, and so we were messing around with that one day, and we had just kind of a light crunch going, and it was kind of interesting. Then he pulled out this pedal. It was just a non-finished pedal with one knob on it, and I didn't know what it was. He's like, "Oh, it's a clean boost." And I was like, "A clean boost? Okay, I've never tried one of those." We put it in front of the amp, and as we began to dial the boost up, we began to get more and more overdrive out of that old Xotic head. And it was such a great sound that it really stuck with me. And so now, years later, I have several boosts on my board, and I use them almost all the time. There's almost always one of them on. And so it's become an integral part of my sound. But now, to back up and let's talk about the different types of boosts that there are and where they came from. We talked several weeks ago about headroom in an amp and how we have the clean waveform, and it's just clean, very sine wave, very smooth. But then as you hit the top limit of the headroom of the amp, that waveform will continue as that volume increases, and that top part of the signal will then be clipped off, and that's what we perceive as overdrive or distortion. It's all the artifacts and all the harmonics of that sound that then turn into overdrive or distortion. And so what the clean boost does, as would come from the name, it simply boosts the signal, and so it's going to increase the volume. And there's different types of that. One of the early types of boosts that were out there was what was known as a treble booster. And this treble booster was definitely not a clean boost by any means. Most of them had some sort of a germanium type of transistor that they used to amplify the signal, and that imparted a lot of extra dirt into it to where it was in some ways almost a fuzz. And so some of the very famous people who used treble boosters a lot would be people like Tommy Iommi, Brian May, Rory Gallagher. Some of these guys were very famous for having used these treble boosters. And probably the most common brand back then would have been the Dallas Arbiter treble booster. We do have some modern varieties with those out there now, with some boutique options like the Analog Man Beano Boost, or perhaps the Catalinbread Naga Viper. Those are some more common treble boosters that are commonly available today. And calling it a treble booster is perhaps not the best way to understand it. It's more of a colored boost. And when I say colored, it means that it has its own EQ curve. It's not a full range thing. So essentially, when it was called a treble booster, it was boosting signal but cutting off a lot of the bass. And so the perception then was that there was more mids and more highs, making it thus a treble booster by perception. And so again, these things were used to push amps like the Marshalls and the Voxes of the day into overdrive, and that's where you have those common sounds. That's where you get that classic Queen sound. That's where you get that classic Black Sabbath type sound that a lot of us are very, very familiar with. And so it's important to note that. Another vintage type of boost that was very, very common was actually not a boost at all in and of itself. It came from a very popular delay of the day, a tape delay called the echoplex. One of my favorite guitar players, Jimmy Page, was very, very famous for using this. Sometimes they would just turn the delay portion of the echoplex off and use the preamp portion of that on and use that as a boost to boost the signal. And that was very common back in the day. And some people will still do that. In fact, Xotic is very famous. They have made their own one knob boost out there that is based on that preamp from the echoplex, and that can be found on a ton of boards. Extremely popular pedal, very great sound, highly recommend it. And then now we also have today just straight clean boosts. There's more full range type boosts, and that's one of the ones I have on my pedal. This one right here is the one that I use a lot. It's the TC Electronic Spark, and for me, the way I like to use this is, again, utilizing that concept of headroom. I like to keep my amp right on that edge of breakup, right on the edge of clipping, so that it's just barely breaking up, just a very, very tiny bit, with my guitar volume on all the way. And then, like I said, I can engage this boost and kick it over the edge into a little bit of overdrive, or I can back off my guitar volume and get just a completely crystal clear sound. So it's extremely useful in that endeavor. You know, some of the other ones that are out there now would be the Wampler DB or the JHS Prestige. Like I said, I've already mentioned the EP boost from Xotic. These would all be clean boosts that are out there now. It's also worth noting that some of these also have the ability to color the tone. The full version of this mini pedal of the Spark actually has an EQ section on there to where you can boost certain frequencies more than the other. And again, it's not an overdrive. It simply just boosts certain frequencies more than others, so that you can, you know, tailor that response to your amp to get the desired effect that you're looking for. So I hope that this episode was beneficial to you in understanding some of the different ways that you can use a boost to just with your amplifier to get some different sounds. Some other things that you can do with these boosts that are extremely useful as well is, depending on where you put them, they can do different things to the rest of your pedals. If you put them before an overdrive or distortion pedal, again, using that concept of headroom, it's going to increase the volume. It's going to push those waveforms higher, so it's essentially going to clip that signal more than it would have without the boost. And then if you put that boost after your drives or after your distortion, what's going to happen is it's going to take that already clipping, already overdriven sound and amplify that, making it louder. So it's just two completely different ways to use it right there. Some people will also put one inside of the effects loop to kind of control overall volume in that way, which would again be kind of a post-gain stage type of boost in most scenarios. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of the flexibility and the application, and how, in my mind, it's absolutely essential that every electric guitar player have at least one boost, if not several boosts, on their board. Well, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next episode. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Have a great week.